On a quiet November night in 1987, viewers across Chicago sat in their living rooms watching late-night television like any other evening. The news played, the glow of CRT screens filling otherwise dark homes. Then, without warning, the broadcast suddenly cut out. In its place appeared a person in a Max Headroom mask, swaying on screen as a harsh electronic buzz crackled through the audio. For a few unsettling moments, viewers had no idea what they were looking at, only that something had gone terribly wrong with the signal on their screens. And more than 3 decades later, the identity behind that intrusion remains unknown. This is the story of the Max Headroom Signal Hijacking, the most bizarre TV hijacking in history. On Sunday night, November 22nd, 1987, WGN TV in Chicago was airing its nightly news. Sports anchor Dan Roan was delivering highlights from a Chicago Bears game when, at around 9:14 p.m., the picture suddenly froze. For about 15 seconds, viewers saw nothing but a dark screen. Then, without explanation, a strange figure appeared wearing a Max Headroom mask, swaying in front of a moving metallic background while a harsh buzzing noise replaced the normal audio. The interruption lasted only about 30 seconds. But for viewers watching alone late at night, the sudden appearance was deeply unsettling. Inside the station, engineers scrambled to understand what was happening and eventually regained control by switching the frequency linking the studio to the transmitter atop Chicago's John Hancock Center. Back on air, a confused Dan Roan told viewers he didn't know what had happened, joking that the computer had gone wild before restarting his report, as if nothing unusual had occurred.
Well, if you're wondering what's happened, so am I. Actually, the computer that we have running our news from...
At the time, most viewers assumed it was just a strange technical glitch. No one yet realized someone had deliberately hijacked the signal. But the strange interruption at WGN was only the beginning. A little over 2 hours later, around 11:20 p.m., another Chicago TV station was hit. This time it happened on PBS station WTTW while they were airing Doctor Who, a popular British sci-fi drama often shown late at night. Without warning, the program suddenly disappeared. Once again, the same masked figure appeared on screen.
I'll get you a hot drink, miss.
Some dry cleaning.
Jesus. What's the way? I guess they're a giant masterpiece for all the greatest world newspaper nerds. My brother is wearing the other one. But it's naughty.
Unlike the first incident, this one lasted longer, nearly a minute and a half, and the content was far stranger. The masked figure spoke through distorted audio, making random jokes and references that barely made sense. He mocked local personalities like Chuck Swirsky, waved a Pepsi can while joking about advertising slogans, and made crude gestures toward the camera. Then came the moment many viewers would later remember most. The masked figure moved partly out of frame while another person, dressed like a French maid, appeared and began hitting his buttocks with with a fly swatter as he shouted in panic.
Coming to get me!
And just like that, the episode of Doctor Who resumed as if nothing had happened. Inside WTTW, technicians could do little to stop it. Unlike the earlier WGN incident, no engineers were on duty at the Sears Tower, now known as Willis Tower, where the transmitter was located. By the time the staff understood what was happening, the pirate broadcast had already ended. Soon after, confused viewers flooded the station with phone calls asking what they had just seen. By the next morning, it was clear this was not just a technical problem. 2 Chicago stations had been hijacked in one night, and no one knew how it was done. Stations reviewed the recordings while the FCC opened an investigation, since interfering with television broadcasts was a serious federal crime. Engineers studying the footage quickly realized this was not random. The timing was precise, and overriding a broadcast signal required specialized equipment and technical knowledge. Whoever was behind it clearly understood how analog TV transmission worked. But to understand why the hijacker chose that strange mask, we first need to know who Max Headroom was. Max Headroom was a fictional TV character popular in the mid-1980s. He was presented as a computer-generated TV host known for his stuttering, glitchy voice. The character came from a dystopian sci-fi story that satirized corporate media and advertising culture. In reality, actor Matt Frewer played the role in heavy makeup against a moving geometric background to create the illusion of digital animation. The character first appeared in a British film before getting his own television series in the United States, along with talk show appearances and commercials. By the late 1980s, Max Headroom had become widely recognizable, especially through Coca-Cola's New Coke advertising campaign. Another reason the disguise worked so well was timing. Just weeks earlier, Max Headroom masks had been widely sold for Halloween, meaning anyone could obtain one without raising suspicion, making the hijacker even harder to identify. After recordings of the hijacking spread, viewers began examining every strange detail, trying to figure out whether the intruder was sending a message or simply causing chaos. Some of the clearest clues pointed directly at WGN, the first TV station they tried to hijack. During the broadcast, the hijacker referred to station employees as world's greatest newspaper nerds, mocking WGN's original meaning, which stood for World's Greatest Newspaper, a slogan tied to the Chicago Tribune, the station's owner. He also mocked WGN sportscaster Chuck Swirsky, calling him both a nerd and a frickin' liberal. What made this especially strange was that Swirsky was a sports commentator, not a political figure, suggesting the insult may have reflected a personal grudge rather than politics, possibly reflecting an off-air workplace dispute or inside joke known only to people around the station. Other parts of the intrusion seemed aimed at television advertising itself. Max Headroom had recently become famous as the face of Coca-Cola's New Coke advertising campaigns. During the hijack, however, the masked figure held up a Pepsi can while repeating the slogan, "Catch the wave," before tossing it aside. Some viewers saw this as ironic, as Max Headroom originally appeared as a satire criticizing corporate media control and advertising. But by the late 1980s, the character himself had become part of major advertising campaigns, especially for Coca-Cola, which implied he had become exactly what he once mocked. The hijacker also sang the line, "Your love is fading," from a Temptation song. Some later suggested this hinted at the fading popularity of New Coke, or even Max Headroom himself, though this remains speculation. The intruder hummed the theme from Clutch Cargo, a cartoon known for its unsettling technique of placing real human lips onto animated characters. He later shouted, "I still see the X," believed to reference an episode called Big X, since the show aired frequently in Chicago reruns. This strengthened theories that the hijacker was a Chicago local who had grown up watching those broadcasts. The broadcast then descended into its most bizarre moment. A second person appeared dressed in what looked like a French maid outfit. While the hijacker was partially off-screen, the newcomer began spanking him with a fly swatter as he shouted in panic, yelling, "They're coming to get me!" But careful viewers later noticed something important. Right before the spanking scene begins, the footage suddenly jump cuts, proving the video had been edited beforehand rather than performed live. This suggests someone off camera had been manually rotating it during filming, further confirming the intrusion was pre-recorded and not happening live during the hijack. Beyond the strange performance, investigators faced a bigger question. How had someone taken over live television at all? At the time, most TV stations transmitted their programs from studio to a high transmission tower using microwave relay signals. Those signals were then broadcast across the city. The hijackers didn't hijack the station's computers. Instead, they overpowered what engineers call the studio-to-transmitter link. By sending a stronger microwave signal on the same frequency toward the tower's receiver antenna, they forced the station's equipment to pick up their pirate signal instead of the real broadcast. Investigators later noted that this didn't necessarily require expensive professional gear. With surplus parts and enough technical knowledge, someone could assemble the equipment themselves. The distorted voice was likely made with a ring modulator, making it almost impossible to recognize the speaker even today. More than 3 decades later, the identity of the Max Headroom hijackers is still unknown. No one was ever arrested. And even after the statute of limitations expired, meaning those responsible could theoretically confess without facing charges, no verified admission has ever surfaced. Over the years, several theories have emerged about who might have been behind the broadcast. One of the theories points to Eric Fournier, later known online for creating the surreal video series Chez St. John. Some internet sleuths believe the unsettling style of his later work resembled the strange tone of the hijacking. But people who worked with Fournier dismissed the idea, pointing out that at the time of the incident, he was still a teenager living in another state, with no access to broadcast equipment or the technical experience required to pull off such an intrusion. Another theory, popularized on Reddit in 2010 by a user named Bpog, claiming that 2 brothers from Chicago's hacking community, referred to as J and K, had both the eccentric humor and the technical surplus gear to pull it off. However, broadcast engineers later argued that the precision required to overpower professional television signals was beyond what even skilled hobbyists typically had at the time. Eventually, even the researcher who promoted the theory withdrew the claim in 2015, leaving the case colder than ever. The theory many investigators consider more plausible points instead to someone inside the television industry. Just months before the incident, WGN had gone through major layoffs due to financial difficulties. Because the hijacker directly mocked both WGN and sportscaster Chuck Swirsky, many believe the culprit may have been someone familiar with the station, possibly a current or former employee with a personal grievance. There is also the technical side. Hijacking a broadcast signal required expensive equipment, careful timing, and knowledge of how television transmissions worked. Lead investigator Dr. Michael Marcus later hinted he had suspicions about a specific individual, but was discouraged from pursuing certain leads, leading some to suspect the culprit may have been professionally connected within broadcasting circles. The statute of limitations for the crime expired in 1992, meaning those responsible could confess today without facing charges. Yet even after all these years, no verified confession has ever appeared. So in the end, the hijacking lasted only a few minutes, without leaving any clear message or trace. More than 30 years later, the person behind the Max Headroom mask remains unknown, leaving behind only a bizarre recording and one of the strangest intrusions ever seen on live television.